What are some great theories but don't work because of human nature? Story 1. Feedback. Most people would rather be ruined by praise than saved by constructive criticism. Criticism usually triggers a fight or flight in a person's brain, and in some cases may cause a person to dig harder into a wrong idea. This is true, but I do think we are capable of overcoming this instinct. I'm not perfect by any means, but I have noticed a considerable improvement with my own ability to take criticism over time, which I think just comes with experience. That said, it only works if you are willing or wanting to be better. I've definitely seen people comfortable with their level and almost like to double down on what is being criticized. I can think of one big example who we talk about every day that fits this. Story 2. You could theoretically virtually eliminate disease in one generation if people followed common sense guidelines. As a caveat, it would require some financial investment. But to flesh this out a bit, in populations at high risk, people could always use rubbers along with pre-P therapy, and pregnant mothers with disease could follow the precautions that lead to transmission being very low, around 1%. But there's the cost and human nature. Good idea in theory, but we currently have countries where the odds of copulating with someone who has an infectious disease, while still in your favor just strictly on a per capita basis, is closer to playing Russian roulette than being struck by lightning. And in some places, Russian roulette would be statistically safer. Though they are damn good ways to protect yourself, my point isn't about practicing safe adult stuff, not sharing needles, etc. And I'm also not going to point out any particular country, as I'm not trying to shame or scare people. A quick Google search will answer your question if you're really interested. I just wanted to point out the sheer magnitude of the problem with diseases in certain places. Story 3, using both traffic lanes and zippering in. When one lane is shut down due to construction, there will always be enough jerks that don't let people in, merge way too early, or block a lane of traffic for this to work. It actually works really well if everybody knows about it and does it sort of properly. You find your spot, depending on how many people are in front of you and where they're going to be merging in. Then you pick the right position and merge in. Works much better if the roads come together only just before merging, like 2 or 3 seconds. You see this work well on on-ramps and on road merges where the traffic has this distance. You'll also see people try to skip the line, only to be heavily denied. Everybody in that segment knows what you did and doesn't care about you. Seen a few cars effectively parked in the grass after the merge point because of being a jerk. Then again, most merges are not like this, and will have two otherwise equal lanes merging into one. Yint. I've noticed that if it's a right lane merging into a left, it's 80% done well, and the last 20% people being jerks and overtaking on the right to skip ahead, but only a minor bit. If it's the left lane merging into the right, it's hell. People merge a quarter mile too soon, opening up a giant amount of asphalt to overtake them, and merge in later, which most people do, and if you don't merge in a quarter mile too soon, everybody assumes you are one of those overtakers and won't give any space. Story 4. Animals in zoos. Oh, a wild, beautiful animal shouldn't be locked in a cage like that, right? Now let's talk about conservation. It's nice in theory to think that our human nature would drive us to donate selflessly to conservation efforts and care deeply about animals and the environment on our own. But there is a very strong link about being able to see or touch something in person and caring about it. The animals at zoos are usually ambassadors, and it gives you a place and an opportunity to learn about what's endangered, what isn't, and common misconceptions about certain species, stuff that you wouldn't just sit around and look up on your own. And it gets the kids invested. Wow, Mom, I just fed a giraffe, so cool. Now your 5-year-old is in love with giraffes, which could blossom into a lifelong love of animals and conservation efforts. Your child could become active later down the road. I know I am one of those kids. Another point, at a good zoo, more animals than you realize were rescued in some way from illegal exotic pet trade. Story 5. Mass transportation. It is one of the few things we could do to significantly reduce air particulate and improve air quality in big cities. To actually be effective, we need enough mass transit buses to get most people where they need to go. Government investment in mass transit will never happen so long as the price of gasoline is low enough for people to ignore the tremendous inefficiency of individual vehicle ownership. If successful, there would be massive layoffs across many transportation-related sectors, including car salesmen, mechanics, middle managers, factory workers. Gas stations would disappear. Double-digit losses of jobs could be expected across the US. Our planet would feel a lot better, though. Story 6. Communism. Lately, I've been interested in how a system like this would work if it was designed around today's internet and supercomputers. Like, if the level of automation and organization that Amazon has figured out went into adequately distributing basic resources, maybe some countries could actually pull it off. I don't know if there's anything in this idea, but it's fun to think about. Story 7. Economics. All of them do not take into account the natural human tendency to want power, which you achieve through hoarding wealth. They don't because there hasn't been a definitive definition of power, though I personally prefer Foucault's over Chomsky's, but he never finished it. Maybe if I had, the world would be a different place, but I digress. Until we consider a lust for power as pathologically unhealthy, all economics, and maybe even the best and practical or ethical political bodies of thought, will all have a flaw and would require constant oversight of those in higher positions. Story 8. Democracy and government itself. Sure, we like to think it works, but does it? Abusers go free, yet someone gets caught with some pot and they get thrown in prison. Not to mention the corruption, it's pretty well hidden, but it's obvious if you don't believe everything you see on the news. The military lost $7 billion right around the time that Colin Kaepernick crap happened, which pretty much just distracted everyone. I probably couldn't even fathom the crap that our government does behind closed doors. Anyone that wants to say I'm crazy, that's fine. Just wait until crap hits the fan. You're going to feel like a major sheep. We have a day to honor Christopher Columbus, for God's sake, yet we have the audacity to talk about building a wall? What the hell is wrong with people? Mass freaking genocide is not something to celebrate. Do we have a day celebrating Hitler? No, I didn't think so. But we only teach our children one side of the story to make us look like the good guys, when in all reality this country was built above the bones of millions, my native ancestors. Story 9. Pretty much all ideas. There's no perfect unifying theory, although we want there to be. All political ideologies turn to crap when taken to their logical extreme, which is what people will do. Reality is messier than theory. We want there to be a rule book, but the law always has to be interpreted. There's always extenuating circumstances, exceptions to the rule, etc. That's the whole idea behind the dialectic, that ideas are best when blended with other ideas, taking the best from each, leaving the worst. The result then being reality tested and hybridized further with other ideas. But none is sufficient unto itself. Story 10. Communism. No possessions, no currency, everyone has exactly what they need. Sounds like paradise, right? Except that every time it's been tried, it's resulted in starvation, genocide, and corruption. Without incentive to work, eventually people will stop working. You can see a stunning difference between the Western powers in Germany, the FRG, and the Soviet power, the GDR. After World War II, the FRG had a post-war economic miracle. The GDR struggled a great deal and lost so many skilled workers. They had to close their border and build a wall around West Berlin. The only place communism really works is in the Catholic Church, because salvation is a strong incentive to work. And in my opinion, serving Jesus is way better than serving a government that doesn't give back. Story 11. Jokes aside, democracy, power in the hands of the people, is all great, but only if the people are properly educated and have sufficient knowledge about what they're voting for, against. We are also far too easily distracted and misled, and our extremely limited attention span allows for crap to pass through the system if the entities pushing for it are tenacious enough. Bills being proposed over and over again under different guises in the current-day U.S. would be a prime example of this. As history teaches us, democracy is quite a volatile form of government. Story 12. Self-driving cars. They're programmed to save as many lives as possible, even at the expense of the driver. For example, a self-driving car approaching a crowd at a cliff edge at a high speed would rather turn off of the cliff than stay at the top but plow into the crowd. Due to selfish human nature, people don't want to buy a vehicle that values the lives of others more than them. Story 13. Warning labels on anything. A lot of people just gloss over them or don't bother paying attention to them. Good examples are when parents leave cleaners or other chemicals in places where kids can get them and don't lock them up. Or like when products such as ephedra or ephedrine were banned because people were taking too much and suffering adverse health effects like hospitalization or dying, even though the label specifically said to consult a doctor and not take them if you had any heart issues or blood pressure problems. Story 14. A guy came into our small office with a display of candles, chips, crackers, gym, etc. The box also had a coin slot. The idea was that we'd pay for whatever we consumed on the honor system. A week goes by, the guy comes back to refill the honor box. And unsurprisingly, the amount of money is less than the missing inventory. He also left a sign that said something to the effect of, "Uh-oh, it looks like some people aren't paying." A week later, same thing. Another week, and when he returns, he just takes the box with him. It's a shame, really. Most of us probably meant to put money in, but forgot. Story 15. Human nature is such a complex, variable thing that any concrete statement either way is kind of ridiculous to me. If we're naturally brutish and violent, then we can't be trusted with freedom or authority both. So what? We're just screwed? If we're naturally good, why is there so much obvious bad? I was listening to last podcast on the left before, and they had a bit about Elliot Roger. Don't know who that is? Look it up. Anyway, that little craphead wrote a very long manifesto, which, God help me, I've read, where he complained that women hated him and nobody ever gave him a chance, and yada yada yada. Roger was a rich, spoiled kid who received nothing but sympathy and well-intentioned advice and help from the people in his life. He should have, in theory, at least been nurtured enough to, you know, not snap and end a bunch of sorority girls. Not a single force in his life made him do that. It wasn't lack of mental health care. It wasn't people around him. It wasn't poverty. It wasn't anything. Elliot Roger was a born psychopath, far as I can tell. I bring that up because we're clearly not a rational species either. I think there's a lot of things acting on humanity 24/7, some good, some bad, some in between. How they manifest is a combination of our environments and how our brains physically develop. I don't know if Elliot Roger was doomed to end up like he did, but I also can't pretend he wasn't given help. He was. So, where else can we go? Having a society that is proactive enough to support one another and to ease people into being members of that society in a constructive way is something we need. But we also need to understand that people are not always going to want to be members of that society. And from there, we get the whole conflict that's defined human history: freedom versus authority. I don't even know if there is a middle ground there because one always eats the other. Story 16. The voting system was meant to bring comments that added to the discussion and bring down ones that didn't, too low effort. No one took it that way, though. And well, unfortunately, Reddit in general. It's great that so many people can express their views and create their own dedicated subs. Unfortunately, lots of toxic communities sprang up, as well as low-effort subs. Story 17. Any sort of powerful entity could be defeated easily if people could just collectively agree to do something. For example, EA. They keep releasing crappy games. People keep buying them. The people cry and whine, and EA doesn't give a crap because they're rolling in money. But imagine what would happen if literally zero people purchased the next EA game. No, not a 20% drop in sales, but literally zero sales. If everyone agreed to just stop purchasing EA games entirely, the company would reverse course immediately. But that won't happen. Same thing with respect to things like politics or other social issues. If people could just all agree to do something, the powerful entities would be defeatable. Story 18. The Cobra Effect. In India during the colonial empire, the government tried to reduce the venomous snake population. They offered financial incentives for captured snakes. At first it worked well and the population reduced. But then some smartass started to breed them. When the government realized that, the program was shut down and people with snakes released them since they lost all their value. The net result was that the snake population dramatically increased. Story 19. Using death row inmates for medical experiments. While this sounds like a good idea on paper, two birds with one stone, scientific advancement and capital punishment, it is dangerous because it dilutes the purpose of the punishment. Here's an easy counter-argument. Researchers announced that they are only 5 years away from completely eradicating cancer. The pace of discovery is held up only by the infrequent availability of live human test subjects on death row. In response, judges and juries become either subconsciously or consciously more prone to sentencing criminals to capital punishment. With the effectiveness of our legal system currently, there is no doubt that at least several innocent people will be sentenced and executed. Here then is the problem. By linking a punishment to a scientific aid, you inadvertently incentivize the death penalty for something other than its original intent. The danger lies in the human judgment component of our legal system. Story 20. Completely segregate anyone and everyone with a communicable serious disease. AIDS and Hep C are the two that come to mind first. I'm not talking about ending them, just putting them in a place somewhere isolated away from the rest of society and letting nature run its course. In about 75 years or so, those diseases would be eradicated. I know this sounds terrible, and there are quite a few shades of gray attached to it, but from a black and white perspective, it would ensure future generations wouldn't have to worry about ever contracting the disease. Sheesh, that sounds morbid reading through it. It would be very difficult to have a loved one or child taken away and put on an island or something. Thank God these are all hypothetical, right, guys? Guys? Story 21. People think losing our humanity is going to save humanity. Losing our humanity. I love how people like to confuse the modern version of humane with the concept of humanity as a whole. We've been abusing each other since the dawn of time, and now, all of a sudden, we start pretending that those things are not a part of human behavior. Humanity is dirty and complicated and violent. This sterilized thing you're calling humanity might be good and beneficial, but only out of denying our true nature. Story 22. Replacing humans for robots so that we don't have to work. There are some industries in which this makes sense, and we should expedite the process. There are some industries where we could technically do it someday, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. I think people have this unrealistic fantasy where no one works anymore, which is absurd for so many reasons, not the least of which is that if everything is automated, what's to stop a small group of people abusing the system for their personal gain? Story 23. Religion. In theory, I love the idea of belief in a greater powers that sets good, moral standards that people should live by. In reality, people force religion upon you. I'm sure everyone's heard someone tell them they're going to hell for reason, or had a Jehovah's Witness come knocking on the door. Many governments are based on religion and make laws based on the majority religion, even if the citizens are free to practice whatever religion they choose. Religion is also by far the cause of more deaths than anything else man-made. Some parts of the world literally try to force it upon you, ending people who practice a religion other than their own. Story 24. In theory, recommendation algorithms that recommend content that is similar to other content you sounds like a good idea. In theory, it means you can easily find more shows that you like. In practice, the lack of diverse content shunts you into very narrow categories of interest, so you get bored more easily, and it actually becomes more difficult to find things you like. It's like eating your favorite food every day for dinner. It'll quickly stop being your favorite food. Story 25. Just be yourself. Yourself isn't bad. I would probably like you. But also we could try to grow and be better, and maybe prune some stuff that isn't helping us anymore. Sometimes we might get defensive about ourselves and end up stifling our own development. It does have a better ring to it, though, than remember that you're a valid human with inherent worth. But some of the things you do or think might not be the best. And we can learn new strategies while reminding ourselves that our self-worth and identity isn't formed from not making mistakes or having to make changes, but rather is universal and unassailable. Story 26. Complete transparency in relationships. Being open and honest with your partner is important, but sharing every aspect of yourself does more harm than good. What are you thinking about? Oh, nothing. No, really, what are you thinking about? Fine. I'm thinking about what I'd do if my brother got assassinated and how expensive it would be to build an armed robot. Because honestly, I think I could figure it out if I was really motivated, but the materials would be expensive. I mean, where do you even buy white phosphorus? Plus, even if I could convert a couple ARs to be full auto, I've heard those Betamags always jam. So maybe figure out a DIY belt-fed gun. But at this point, it's going to take too long to build, and maybe I just need a couple drones and some homemade napalm. But then how much do those heavy lift drones cost? Should I be concerned with collateral damage? Why are you like this? Story 27. Libertarianism. Let people do what they want sounds pretty great in theory. In practice, you end up with abusers, garbage everywhere, bear problems, and violence. See Grafton, New Hampshire. Any system that relies on humans being rational actors is bound to fail. I'm a recovering libertarian. The selfishness and hypocrisy finally drove me out. The elevator pitch still sounds great, honestly, but spending so much time with those who push it really opened my eyes. They only want to be able to do whatever they want without considering other people. They can't look at the system past their own yard. They want it all to be there for them, but not for anyone else. Kind of made me a little bitter. Story 28. Trickle-down economics. At least it seems like a lot of folks think this is a really good idea, but in reality, it's a con game that does the opposite of what purports to do. A war on drugs. Again, it must sound good to lots of people because we keep ramping it up. But good golly, Miss Molly, look how it turns out. Privatizing incarceration system. Well, somebody's making a killing. And the same can be said for most privatization of government services. Story 29. Capitalism. Anyone can buy or sell anything they want at whatever price everyone agrees to. Competition makes the businesses stronger and customers benefit by lower prices. In reality, the biggest corporations just buy out competitors, keep their brands to give an illusion of competition all so companies can maximize profits by constantly charging the most they can get away with and selling the cheapest designed obsolescence product they can make. Story 30. That applies with most things that require patience and determination, especially in the field of mental health. You can't just follow something that's designed to heal when you don't spend a great deal of time practicing it. Nothing comes easy, especially when you have been doing things wrong your whole life. In theory, these things are supposed to work. They are by no means a waste of time. One excellent example is learning and applying cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. Given enough time and practice, it can do wonders for one's mental state. It can prevent anxiety from negatively impacting us altogether, thus avoiding these band-aid solutions, such as taking medication and so on. People are always caught up in the moment, and nothing ever seems to work.